only one I saw was The Big Short and Star Wars.
Hmm.
Have you seen The Big Short?
No, what's it about?
It's about like the economy, the housing market crash.
Hmm.
So it's like it's just this. It's just like what I thought was they used way too many stars for the movie.
Uh-huh.
Like it was like Steve Carell. The only ones that I thought were necessary was Steve Carell and his crew, which are known actors, but they're not like Brad Pitt stars.
Uh-huh.
So it's Steve Carell and his crew, and then Ryan Gosling. I think that's what that alone would have been enough for the movie.
Hmm.
And maybe Christian Bale. You could replace Christian Bale. It wasn't. He didn't do any acting. Like he was just sitting on his chair.
This was a movie about the housing bubble
Yeah,
in
the housing bubble.
2008.
Yeah, that one.
What what was what were all these people doing? Why do you need
Alright,
stars for that?
It's like I guess people want stars so that their names would be on the movie.
Hmm.
Like when the movie comes out, it's like staring Steve Carell. You're like, oh shit, I gotta go watch that movie. I love Steve Carell, right?
Yeah.
But this movie had Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, Christian Bale, Brad Pitt, like Selena Gomez, and it's like this has all these like stars, and I'm like, why is that? Why do you need so many?
Yeah.
That like these, you could just replace any of them except the ones I told you before by any other actor, and it would have been just as fine. Like they didn't do anything. Like Brad Pitt was fucking irrelevant in the movie. He was there like 10 minutes out of the hour and a half, and he
Uh-huh.
didn't do jack shit. Like you could have put anyone instead of Brad Pitt, an old guy doing his part. It would have been just as good, because he was a non-factor. Like the fact that they paid Brad Pitt, God knows how many millions for fucking showing up and saying like 2 lines of text. It's like that's just ridiculous. It was like you could have used that money on other stuff, like in the movie.
Yeah.
So it's like the movie's like first it's this Christian Bale is like a guy with like I think it's like Asperger's or some kind of something like that lets him like be super smart or super focused on certain things, right?
Uh-huh.
So he works for this trading company, and he's supposed to find good deals, like buy this company now, sell it later, make profit, right? Stuff like
Yep.
that. So he's like, he's investigating the housing market, and he's like, he just says like, oh, this is gonna like it's gonna blow up. Like
Hmm.
these guys are getting like the people that are broke are buying houses with no money because the banks are loaning. They're loaning. It's like they're loaning money to people that don't have the means to pay it back. Like,
It
usually
was
they
ridiculous at the time. I remember watching like like those random ass house hunter shows or whatever where someone's trying to buy a house and they follow them
yeah,
around or whatever. People were buying houses and like in hindsight it should have been so obvious to me that this was going to
yeah,
fall apart, but people were buying a house with a mortgage that was interest only. So like they weren't
they
even
would
making progress on the loan. They were,
yeah
and that was the most they could afford. And in
exactly
like
yeah
5 years, the mortgage would set up so that in 5 years the rate would jump up
yeah
so
yeah.
that they would start paying it off. But they were already at the most they could afford. And this woman was saying like, well, in 5 years I'll probably have a promotion or two. I'll make more money. I'll be able to afford it. And I'm like, that's insane. Like
Yeah.
you're gambling that you're not going to lose your house, that you're going to
And
get
you're wasting
promotions.
all this money. You're wasting because it's going towards nothing.
Yeah, and it's literally like I mean, housing costs are going to be expensive for anybody, but it shouldn't be like 100% of your money. Like you shouldn't be right on the hairy edge, like
Yeah,
all the time.
that's just a terrible decision. But their
Yeah.
thing was like, what they were doing is like this guy noticed that first they were giving money like that to people who didn't have the means, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why the banks were doing it is because they were bundling what'd you say was the word for the housing thing?
Mortgages.
Mortgage. They were bundling the mortgages. So like they have ratings, right? A AAA mortgage is like someone has like a stable job that will pay it off.
Uh-huh.
They will pay the bank every month. They're not risky at all.
Yeah.
But there's people that are risky, you know, it's like if I lose my job, I'll be like I'm fucked basically. I have to find a job, you know, I have to stop a lot of things so I get the least amount. Like if I lose my job, I'll be in a really bad spot
Yeah.
economically, right? Like, I could go bankrupt if I don't get a job in like 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like these guys would be like C or D or E rating,
Uh-huh.
but the banks were grouping it with other A or double A or triple A mortgages and selling them as triple A, the whole thing, as if the whole thing
Hmm.
was secure.
I see.
So they were bundling them up. So you would buy like other banks or I don't know who was buying them, but it was like someone would buy those mortgages and it would be like they weren't buying one house, they were buying like I don't know, a city worth, you know.
Yeah.
So there was some mortgages that were good, some were bad, but the bank was selling them as if they were all safe or they were all
Mm.
good. So then
That should
that's
definitely be illegal, right?
yeah,
That's like
I mean that was
fraud,
definitely
basically.
that was ridiculous. So like what they go in the movies is they just go around like it starts with Christian Bale basically thinking that it's gonna crash.
Uh-huh.
So they're like, huh, you know what? He wasn't sure if he was gonna invest in it because it was like what they would do. You wouldn't invest the money. You would have to you would go to a bank. So this guy goes to a bank and he's like, and like or it's like he says, you know, he's talking to the guy that he does the investments for. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm gonna go against the housing market. The guy's like, you're an idiot. Like you can't go against the housing market. Like it will never collapse.
Yeah.
He's like, no, trust me, it's gonna collapse. It's just a matter of finding out like when, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he goes to a bank. And he's like, I want to bet. It's like you would buy bonds against the housing market. So you'd be like, if the housing market collapses, the bank has to pay you off.
Yeah.
Like they have to basically it's a bet, you know. So the
Mm-hmm.
guy's like just goes out and he's like, hey, if I wanted to bet against the housing market crashing, how much how much would you bet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the bank is like, how much are you thinking of spending? The guy's like, I don't know, $500 million.
Yeah.
The guy's like, hold on. Like the guy in the bank is like, you know, get me the manager and a bottle of champagne. I just took like 500 million from this idiot. He's literally celebrating like in his face. So
Uh,
you don't pay the 500 million at one go, but you pay a monthly fee.
yeah.
So he goes to like Chase and he's like 500 million. Then he goes to another bank. He's like a billion, or stuff like that. So he's paying all these premiums every month to the banks, like
Mm-hmm.
for the bets. And like the company that he was investing for, this dude, you were losing all this money. Like what the fuck? We're never
Yeah.
gonna win it back because you know they don't expect the market to crash. So they have that scenario. It's like a split movie. Like
Uh-huh.
Christian Bale never interacts with Steve Carell, but they're both they're both like separate stories within the same subject.
Uh-huh.
So what Steve Carell does is Ryan Gosling works for Chase.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows what's going on and he's like, wait, there's something fishy going on, right? So he's like, I want to make some money. I don't give a shit about my job. Like he wants to make money by screwing his job. Like, you know,
Uh-huh.
by ruining Chase basically. So he tells Steve Carell the thing, like why it's happening, and Steve Carell's like, that's stupid. I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Right? So he works for like a consulting firm.
Uh-huh.
So he's like, oh, of course that's stupid. You know, I don't believe you. And he's like, no, trust me, just go like talk to this person or something. So he goes, and like it starts developing, right? So the guy's trying to find out if what Ryan Gosling is saying is true, because if it is, he obviously wants to get in on it. You know,
Mm.
because it's so much money that they can make.
Yeah.
So the guy's like, okay, and he starts finding out, and then when it all starts escalating, like the market just keeps increasing, but at this point, like while the movie is happening, just the economy keeps growing, right?
Mhm.
Everything is fine, but these guys are they're finding out stuff about these places that is like bad, right?
Yeah.
So these guys, Steve Carell and his crew, they go to this place and it's like, okay, you are the company that gives the loans the rating, right?
Uh-huh.
Why did you give this loan that is like a person with like no job? Why did you put this loan as like a triple A when
Yeah.
it should have been a C? and the lady is like, well, if we don't give him a AAA, the guy across the street is gonna give him a AAA. Like they will lose money by not lying because the other people would lie.
Like everybody was doing it, so
Yeah,
they had to,
everybody's
like,
doing it.
keep
So
up.
they're like, so Steve Carell is like, that can't be like he's literally while he's like in front of her, he's like, that can't be right. Like that's stupid.
Yeah.
And then the other lady is like, no, this is just my job, you know. And then he's like, that can't be right, dude. That's like illegal. That's like stupid for the like you could, you know, the bank isn't the bank like reviewing these? And she's like, no, the bank doesn't give a shit. He's
Yeah.
like, what? That can't be right. So he goes to Florida, and it's like they go to these like places where they were constructing all the houses. So he's just driving around, and the place is like fucking mansions, right? There's like huge houses, and he's driving, and there's nobody out. All the houses have for sale stuff on the door. He's like, that can't be right. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And they're driving with a real estater or a realtor, whatever they're called.
Uh-huh.
And she's telling him like, oh yeah, I helped sell this house and stuff like that. She's like, oh yeah, I sold this house to this guy. And the guys are like cleaning the houses out, like they're leaving because they can't pay.
Mm.
So Steve Carell is like, just like, he's literally cannot believe how stupid this thing is. Like as it's happening, he's like, this cannot be right. Like he can't believe what Ryan Gosling said was true.
Yeah.
So he's like, that can't be right. And then they go this one guy who's like living in his house, and like they knock on the door, and he's like, they just start asking him some stuff. He's like, hey man, do you know like, do you have any neighbors or anything? He's like, no, nobody lives around here. And he's like, well, I got this paper here that says that the landlord hasn't paid the mortgage.
Mm.
And the guy's like, I've been paying rent. So the landlord was renting the place up and pocketing the rent money instead of paying the mortgage. So at the end of the movie, you see the guy, like, he gets evicted because
I think
the
that
bank
happened
takes
to
the
a
house.
lot of people when,
Yeah.
like, the landlord's mortgage fell through in the crash, and then just these random people who were renting ended up getting kicked out
Yeah,
when
exactly.
the landlord loses the place.
Exactly. So it's like they just put this guy as an example, but then it's like, so the guy's just like, okay, this is fucking ridiculous. Like the guy's like, this is stupid. Like there's no fucking way this is how it's actually going.
Yeah.
So they go to bank tellers in Florida. So they're like, okay, what is going on? Like, what if, say, you know, the guy's like, okay, what if I want to get a loan? So, oh, okay, you just sign here, and then we'll give you the loan. And the guy's like, well, what if I have no income? He's like, oh, that doesn't matter. He's like, well, how can it not matter? He's like, oh yeah, you just leave it at blank. I'm like, what? The guy's like, how could that be? And then the two guys are just laughing their asses off as it's happening because they're like, oh yeah, dude, we given so many loans in a month. It's like they were bragging about it. And Steve Carell is like, dude, are you guys like fucking stupid? Like this isn't right.
And in
And, like-
hindsight, it should have been so obvious that it was coming. But
Mhm.
I don't know. At the time, it was like, I don't know.
Yeah, when it happened, everybody was like freaking out. Like that can't be right.
Yeah.
But like, and so after that happens, is like they go to a convention of bankers in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
and they go, and then they're meeting with Steve Carell has a one-on-one meeting with this guy that Ryan Gosling helps set up, and he's like the CFO or like one under the CEO of Chase.
Uh-huh.
And the guy's talking to him and is like, and that's when the guy explains to him how they just like the guy's laughing while he's eating the sushi. He's like, oh yeah, he's just laughing about how all the bonds are together, all the mortgages and stuff, how it's
Yeah.
never, how he's like, you know, or what was, he's just, it's like he gives him the last piece that he needed
Mhm.
for like to make a big investment. He invests like, you know, millions and millions.
Mm.
And just a few like months later it crashes. Or like everybody's telling these guys like, dude, we're losing so much money every month, like we can't, you know, we need to show face to the CEO or whatever. You know, the company is like losing all this money, and they're like betting it on something that they thought it was impossible for it to happen.
Yeah.
So at the end like of the movie, once the market collapses and Steve Carell didn't want to sell the bear bond, the money, because they thought it would like be worth more. but then they were like holding the banks basically hostage because it was like, they were like reporting losses obviously because of the market, and then they
Yeah.
had all this debt that they had to
Then
pay
they
off.
also had the people who had called them out on it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so he didn't want to do it, but in the end, he just sells it at like the highest point or something. It's
Hmm.
like because they couldn't afford. Like, what if they just kept it and like the banks just like went bankrupt or something and they wouldn't pay it? So there's like the guy just he sells it off. And they make like billions of dollars. It's like ridiculous amount of money.
Uh,
And then they do like a separate showing of the of shit Batman for his name.
hmm.
What's his name? What's it? What Bruce? No. What's the actor that plays
Christian
Batman?
Bale?
Christian Bale. They do like he goes on his whiteboard and he just writes like his stock percentage, how much his stock grew
Uh,
from like buying from like winning. And it's like it was like always like 9%, 7%, 11%.
yeah.
And when he was losing all the money from not winning, it was like minus 10 or minus 20%. And then once it pays off, he's like 470 something percent. It's like fucking insane.
That's crazy.
And yeah, they show and then they do like they show how the government bailed all the banks out,
Hmm.
and only one person went to jail from the entire like.
Yeah, that's really kind of crazy that like nobody was held accountable.
Yeah,
And like
every kept every.
like I can understand how they bailed out the banks because like it definitely could have been worse if they just let the banks totally fail.
Yeah,
Like that wouldn't have helped the economy.
I mean you can't function without like the people need the bank.
Yeah, like that would have been I think that would have actually been really bad. But afterwards, after bailing out the banks, they definitely should have been like investigating people like
Yeah, like how is it not ridiculous that these guys were like just getting away with it, and they
yeah.
still did until the end. Like nobody went to jail for it. Only one dude. It's like
Because they've got so much money,
yeah,
they're
exactly.
immune.
It's ridiculous, man. So that movie really like gets you thinking and stuff like that.
Mm.
You just
That,
think of this like that's just fucking retarded. Like these guys are like they were just playing around like these guys' lives.
yeah.
They were like oh okay. One point when they're in Florida, it's like they after they go to the bank tellers, they like the guys give them like a name and a contact for this girl. So they go find this girl and she's a stripper.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, okay, Steve Carell pays for a dance or whatever, but he's like, okay, just keep your clothes on. They just talking. It's like, okay, just tell me. And then she's like, yeah, I own like 2 houses and stuff. He's
Uh-huh.
like, and then he's like, well, you can't. You're paying like fixed interest, and then once it becomes in like 5 years, once it becomes the like a percentage of the value of the property instead of just interest,
Yeah.
it's like you can't afford that. And she's like, oh, no, by then, I'll sell the like one of the houses or something. And the guy's like,
Mm.
she'll just take another loan. The guy's like, I can't fucking believe you're saying this. Like, the
Yeah.
guy's like, I can't believe these people think that they think they have it under control, and it's like obviously not the case.
It's an interesting line that like on one hand it's super annoying when the government is like the nanny state or whatever and they like, tell you what to do all the time. And
Mm.
it's like, well, people should be free to make bad decisions if they want to. But on the other hand, if everything was just like total like absolute freedom and you could do anything, there would be so many people who would just like tear their own lives apart with bad decisions.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's interesting. Somewhere in the middle there is like a reasonable balance between letting people do anything and letting them do what's they want to do.
Yeah, the thing is like when I mean the problem is when they're like misled into
Mm.
making bad decisions. Like when people like are not looking out for the best interest of the people, but
Yeah.
like for their own profit. That's when stuff goes wrong. So it's like when you have like private prisons. That's like that just makes no fucking sense, dude. Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
crazy. If you
They
ever
make
want to
money.
see another documentary on like, or another movie on like that sort of like financial abuse stuff,
Yeah.
I think it's on Netflix. There's a documentary about Enron, which was some enormous company that like imploded, that no one thought would ever fail,
Oh, really?
and they went through all the like insane abuses that Enron was doing. Like, I can't remember the whole documentary because it was a long time ago, but like one of the things they were doing is they somehow set up a system so that they could like ship electricity between states or something. Like they controlled all these power plants,
Uh-huh.
and they had the ability to ship electricity from place to place,
Mm.
and there would be like different prices. Like some states pay so much for electricity and some
Oh, okay.
states pay more. So what they would do is they would ship all the electricity out of state until there was like a brownout in California,
Mm.
until like everyone in California lost power, and then that would cause like a huge spike in price for
Oh,
electricity, and
okay.
then they would like ship it back to California at like a higher rate. So they
That's
were
ridiculous.
like intentionally causing power outages just so they could like sell electricity back to California that came from California.
Wow.
And
Oh, so
like,
they basically like farmed it in California, and
yeah.
then they take it out of state just so they can make like hunger for it, and then they put it back in. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.